Hello, Flutie friends. Today I want to talk about a tough topic, triple tonguing. I know. Triple tonguing is the bane of most of our existence, and it can be really, really frustrating, especially in the beginning. So before we dive in, I want to touch on a couple of important things. One, if you don't already have a really refined single tongue articulation, then I would highly recommend that you take a step away from this particular subject and maybe dive into your single tonguing. The reason is because if you don't have a really, really refined and beautiful single tongue articulation, you are really going to struggle with the ideas of double and triple tonguing. So, if you listen to yourself play and you find that you're not matching up, if you find that you're doing a little bit of that gada thing, let's take a step back and maybe hone in on that single tongue articulation first. Now, that said, if you do have a beautiful single tongue articulation, then you're ready. It's time to dive in because we can move faster. We can do some incredible things with double and triple tonguing. Now, in this video, we are specifically going to hone in on triple tonguing, not so much double tonguing, although the technique is very similar. Second of all, if you're practicing double or triple tonguing for the first time, or you're coming back to it after a long time of not working on it, remember that it is a muscle that can atrophy. So you as a player do need to work on that muscle periodically so that it doesn't just fall away, right? Because it will go away if you don't practice it regularly. So I can speak from my own experience as someone who learned how to double and triple tongue, and then when I quit my flute and came back to it, I could not do it anymore. So I really had to build that muscle back up. So taking some time, at least once a week, and just taking a little bit of time and going through a double tonguing exercise or working on your scales, double or triple tonguing will be great for keeping that muscle and continuing to build, but also maintaining your status quo. So diving right in, first and foremost, we want to think about the motion of the tongue, right? So the articulation is, for triple tonguing, is tuckata tuckata or duggada duggada. Personally, I kind of like duggada duggada, but it depends really on the type of music that you're playing. Or if you're really getting into some staccato, short, tuckata tuckata is great. Duggada duggada is a little bit smoother, a little bit more legato, although we don't necessarily always think of triple tonguing as a legato style, but it's a little bit more connected, duggada duggada. But if you're looking for a little bit more separation, tuckata tuckata, a little bit more separated, a little bit more harsh of an articulation than duggada duggada. So again, T, K, T, or D, G, D. Tuckata tuckata or duggada duggada. The thing that I see a lot of students try to do is tuckata tuckata, which works okay, but that's more of a double tonguing thing, right? So that's more of somebody taking their double tonguing technique and translating it directly over to a compound meter. But instead, we want to go tuckata, right? Because that's going to allow us to emphasize the correct beat. Tuckata, 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 tuckata. Okay? Because while the goal is to make sure that the ka is just as strong as the ta, even the best players will struggle with that. So it's better to emphasize the beats as they're supposed to be emphasized, tuckata, 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 than tuckata, kata, tuckata, kata, right? Do you see how that's weaker, even just me speaking it? So tuckata, tuckata, or duggada, duggada are going to be your best bet. So we're kind of rolling in a circle, right? Tuckata, 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 tuckata. Right? Now, with that said, there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. So for one, we have to be so relaxed here, right? Your neck, your shoulders, your jaw, your tongue, your throat, all of that has to be so relaxed. So Think about not the fact that you don't have to hold your head onto your spine. First and foremost, let's start there. You don't need to hold your head on top of your spine. Your connective tissue naturally holds your skull on top of your spine. You don't have to use your muscles to do that. So relax the back of the neck and just let it sit. Let your head sit on top of your spine so naturally, okay? Drop the shoulders, right? If we're up here, we're gonna be tight here. Drop the shoulders. Take a few deep breaths like you're yawning to think about opening that throat, okay? And when you do that, also think about letting the tongue sit naturally, relaxed in the bottom of your mouth, in your bottom jaw. Let your jaw hang ever so naturally. It's gonna hinge back, right? Let it hinge. Let that tongue sit in a relaxed position at the bottom of your mouth. Then, we have the relaxation, right? Because we cannot double tongue if our body is trying to help us by tensing, right? If you do this, your tongue is not going to work, right? You have to think of the tongue as more of a flap than a muscle, right? So we're actually going to use our air to propel that flap. Ducka, 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 right? Instead of using the tongue to go tuck, right? Because if you use that muscle too much, it's gonna wear out and it's gonna slow down. But if you're using the air to just let it flap, ducka, 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 you're gonna be in way better shape and you're not gonna get as fatigued. So now that we've relaxed, we have to think about the air support. You will not get anywhere with double and triple tonguing if you are not supporting your sound. If you are not supporting, you have to use the air to push the tongue, right? Not the other way around. We're not using the tongue to push the air. We're using the air, meaning we're filling up our balloon of an abdomen, and we are using our abdominal muscles to push air faster out, okay? So finally, the one thing that tends to happen when we articulate is our airstream will raise. Our airstream tends to go up. So you are more likely to break up to the next octave by mistake. So try to consciously keep your air where it needs to go for whatever octave you're playing in, right? You're not often going to be double tonguing in this like super low, a low D or a low C. You're not often going to be double or triple tonguing a low C. But if you ever find yourself in that case, remember that you've got to keep that air low because of the fact that you're using so much air to propel your tongue, right? That it's going to slowly creep up and you're going to break up to that C on the staff before you know it. But again, we have to use so much air. So the point is that you need to really, really support your sound because as soon as your air starts to falter, your tongue is going to slow down. So a couple of ways that we can practice our triple tonguing. For one, I really love doing scale work. So you can do chromatic scales from low C up to high C. You can do it in groups of 3, da 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 da, right? You could do that. You can also, one of my favorite scale books, and I've had this book forever and ever and ever, would be Mel Bay's Indispensable Scales, Exercises and Etudes for the Developing Flutist. And this has scales written in so many ways, okay? So each page, you've got a C major scale and the so each set of pages is designated to a scale. So the major scale and then the minor scales. But you'll notice that it has it written in several different ways. So we've got the triplet scale, for instance. This would be a great opportunity to practice your double tongue or your triple tonguing. Da 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 da, right? You also have whole tone scales written in compound meter, which is another great way to practice these. So that's the first way, would be to practice your scales. You can also triple up, so you could do C, 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 D, 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 E, 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 F, 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 right? Okay. The other exercises that work really, really well, would be this book right here. This is a fantastic book. I use it to teach out of all the time. 243 double and triple tonguing exercises. They start easy and get progressively more difficult. So if you want to work on triple tonguing in particular, page 24 is where the triple tonguing section starts. And all of these exercises, starting with number 1, get progressively more difficult and challenge you with the metronome to work on your triple tonguing. Now, it is important to note that there are several different schools of thought. Like I said, there are lots of teachers that feel that taka is better. Also, there is ta-taka. I don't personally think that those work very well for me. I find taka to be better, faster, stronger. So I highly recommend doing what makes sense for you. Particularly in this book, they recommend ta-taka, which again, that doesn't work super well for me, but that may work for one of you. And I love it. Whatever works, let's leverage it, right? Finally, working out of some more advanced excerpts. The William Tell Rossini excerpt is a great triple tonguing exercise. And then, of course, there are sections on double and triple tonguing in the Trevor Y practice books for the flute in his articulation book. So it's important to find exercises that work for you. However, keep in mind that, again, you have to work on this a lot. We can't just practice it once, perfect it, and leave it alone, because this muscle will atrophy. It will atrophy. And, one day you'll pick things up thinking, oh, I can totally double and triple tongue my heart out, and you won't be able to do it. So it's important to schedule some time in your practice to work on it specifically, to make sure that you are keeping that muscle up, right? It's like we can't skip leg day at the gym. We can't skip articulation work. So, and dare I forget to mention, in the Reichert, there are double and triple tonguing exercises. There are also, with the Taffanel and Gobert, if you play the scale game, there are opportunities to practice double and triple tonguing there. And so there's an abundance of double and triple tonguing exercises that you can absolutely leverage and find what works for you to practice and perfect. So best of luck to you. If you have questions, feel free to jump into the comments and like and subscribe if this was helpful.